And welcome to MoneyLIVE Autumn Festival, the big meetup. Just to give you an idea about what we're doing today, or rather in this session, the theme is Remote, Hybrid, Local, the future of work in banking. Big question really for everybody. What is the future? Where are we going? What is the new normal? Sounds very profound, a bit like something Captain James T. Kirk would utter, except this is very real because there are implications there for all of us. Because let's face it, the last 18 or so months have been a bit of a roller coaster ride. We've seen monumental shifts for the workforce. Institutions across the board have had to adapt, or to use the other parlance which came in through COVID-19, pivot, the P word. Basically, they're rethinking, they're re-envisioning what the future of work will look like. So it's a big, big question. The good news is that I'm not going to answer it because I have a selection of people who are going to do that job for me. We're going to kick off the session with a keynote. It's brought to us by Tracey Davidson. Now, Tracey is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of Handelsbanken UK. I think I have pronounced that correctly. Yeah, she's given me a thumbs up. I'm not going to pronounce it a second time because when I tried to do that, I made a mess of it. But what she's going to do in this keynote address is look at the bank's vision of the future of work. So I'm going to hand the floor over to Tracey. Sadly, she can't take questions at the end because I know that she has to rush off to a meeting. But anyway, there won't be any need to ask her any questions because she's got a lot to say. Tracey, over to you. Thank you so much.
Juliet. Thank you, Juliet, for that fabulous introduction. Let's hope I hold true to it. I'm delighted to be here to join this really exciting event, especially as it's in real life. What a treat. I was reflecting on the way over here, actually, that we, again, in the last 18 months we've been working, our lives have changed such a lot. While I was doing events like this during lockdown, of course, you need your prep, you need your talk, you need to know what you're doing, and you've got your logistics. But during lockdown, I had to learn things about lighting and acoustics in my own home. This morning, I had to remember real shoes, somewhere to put my mic, and of course, my vaccination certificates. So, gosh, if we'd looked about 5 years ago, what life would be like now? Yeah, we're really tested, aren't we? So I have the privilege of starting this session, as Juliet introduced. Now, there are really interesting sessions after me that go into some of the subject matter I'll touch on in great detail. So I'm going to keep my coverage of how I envisage the future of work in banking high level. I'm going to talk about the industry in general and Handelsbanken in particular. And I'm going to look at the question through the lens of the customer, through the work that we do, our business models, and of course our people. And then I'll wrap that up with my thoughts and what I actually think is going to be the future of business with my crystal ball. But first, for those of you who've never heard of Handelsbanken, perfectly pronounced, thank you, Juliet, we are a UK retail bank. We serve our customers a relationship-based customer service out of our branch network, which spans the whole of the UK. We focus our business on being successful through having the most satisfied customers and controlling our costs. I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go through my thoughts on the different subjects. So first, let's start with the customer. Now, of course, that's actually why we're here. Our customers are why we have work to do in the first place, and they're the most important aspect that we should think about when we think about work in the future, certainly to my mind. And we live in the age of the consumer. Never before have customers had so much choice and so much information on which to base that choice. Too much, maybe, but they've certainly got information. When I think about my parents' generation, banking was one-dimensional. You got it by the local branch, probably delivered by a parental figure, maybe a bit authoritarian, but certainly 100% in person. It was the only option. Today, we've got all the choice we like. We can choose to bank with a supermarket. We can get credit at the point of sale. We can pay for our coffee with our mobile phone. And according to those really cool TV ads I'm seeing at the moment, I can talk to a mortgage advisor in my pajamas at 1 o'clock in the morning, if I want to. So we all, as business professionals and bankers, need to listen to our customers to decide the shape of the business going forward. In Handelsbanken, as I mentioned to start with, customer service is key to our success. And every year we judge ourselves against this by listening to external, independent, third-party customer satisfaction surveys. And this year in 2021, we, for the 13th consecutive year, scored top in customer satisfaction from our customers. Now, whilst that's nice to read, what we use that data for is to inform ourselves about what our customers think of what we do. They'll tell us what they like, what they want more of, what they want less of, what they'd like us to do differently. And that's going to be what informs how we work going forward. If we spend a minute thinking about business model, so there are a myriad of different banking business models out there. Obviously, we have the traditional high street bank that we're all familiar with, but also in recent times we've got new models. We've got digital only, we've got payments only, we've got credit card only businesses, and they all sit alongside very comfortably the traditional banks. But of course, traditional banks need to stay competitive, they need to be relevant and successful, so they need to adapt their business model. I always think about strategy and business models as a bit like the fairy tale of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. If you get dazzled too much by the options and provide your customer base with too much, you risk being mediocre at everything. And if you narrow your business model too much, you then risk being subject to volatility in performance and very suddenly becoming obsolete. So the sweet spot is to find the right business model that gives your chosen customer base the right service, the right thing that they want. And in order to do that, again, you need to listen. So in Handelsbanken, we have a relationship-led bank model, as I described before. You heard me talk about our branch network, but we focus just on UK customers and customers who want a relationship where they meet their bankers in real life. And we do that in our branches. So we focus and make sure they understand what we stand for and that we can support them in the long term rather than in the short term simply on a commodity. So what about digital banking, I hear you say? Good question. During the pandemic, we've all read, haven't we, that people have taken up digital banking at a faster rate than ever before. During the months of March and April, I think it was, in 2020, 12% of UK adults downloaded a banking app for the first time. And our customers are similar. They love digital products just the same as you and I do, but they want it as an enhancement to the relationship, person-led business model that we offer. So that's what we'll be focusing on, and when we go forward, is enhancing and continuing to make that service rich to the customers so that they can see us in person when they want and choose to self-serve when they want, at their choice. If we then also move and think about the type of work we do, thinking back again to the beginning of the pandemic, I don't know about you, I felt like we went from running a bank in an office to running a bank off the kitchen table, like that, overnight. And at the same time as doing that, we had to serve and take care of our customers who were looking down the barrel of financial ruin, perhaps. They were worried about their health. We were all really upset and confused about what the future held in this global pandemic as it developed. But what I found, and what I think all of us did in the industry, is we stepped up. We served our customers, we supported them. We also delivered new products, government-led initiatives to provide customers with the support they needed in a never-before-seen wave of state intervention. We did that well, and in doing so, I think we all proved to ourselves that our industry can work remotely and flexibly in order to do these things. And that's food for thought for all of us when we think about how we will work in the future. We do, however, have obligations. We've got obligations to our customers, deliver the right outcomes, take care of vulnerable customers. We have regulatory obligations as well. We need to do all of that. But we have now got these options available to us into how we put that together. If we think also about how all of our customers coped during that time, I'm humbled and proud of my colleagues at Handelsbanken. We kept every branch open and we supported them throughout that period of time. And I think all of us as employees and as people came through that period of time stronger. So turning probably to the meatiest of all those considerations for how we envisage working in the future, let's think about people. And I suppose there's 4 points I think about here. I think about the skills you need to be a banker today, about the culture of our companies, about the choice that individuals have, and actually diversity and inclusion as well. So the first one, skills. It's actually not that easy to do banking. It's not just about a smile and a yes and a no. There's actually some really technical, challenging parts, whether you're working on the technology side or if you're actually serving customers. You might need to deliver lending advice or financial planning advice, but alongside taking care of our customers in a good way, we also need to prevent financial crime, and we need to also prevent tax evasion. We have huge responsibilities to our society in which we work. So that needs training. We can do various things online, but this is by no means a tick box exercise for anybody. And I firmly believe that we need training in person, that you get a richness of development by meeting people, engaging with them, collaborating, arguing, making mistakes. I always use the phrase osmosis learning. By being in the office with other people while they work, you learn. You see good ways to do things. You see bad ways to do things as well. But you learn and you develop. And that gives people a richness to their knowledge and their professionalism when they serve customers and provides us with our leaders of the future. So I think that's one aspect to think about. Culture is key. All of our companies have cultures, and they drive what we do and the service our customers get. At Handelsbanken, we have quite a deeply ingrained culture, which allows us to operate in quite a unique way. We have a decentralized model where decisions are made closest to the topic, closest to the customer, or the area of the bank that we need it. And by giving accountability to the individuals who make those decisions, we get better decisions for our customers and for our bank. Now, in order to do that well, we need that experience, that collaboration and training. And I think culture is going to be a topic that we come back to year after year post this period in time. Diversity and inclusion. We talk about this a lot in our industry. We have just had the world's best project. We have proven without a shadow of a doubt that finance can be delivered to our customers safely in a flexible way and a way in which can accommodate the needs of children and dependents. So what a huge opportunity, or indeed a demand upon us to ensure that we use that knowledge to deliver better diversity and inclusion into our industry. We know that's better for our businesses, it's also better for our customers. And that's a responsibility on us, I think. And finally then, of course, us as employees. We have so many choices. You'll have read them. All the feedback about what people want following this period. And to me, there's no one answer, I don't think, other than I think we all want a bit of what we had during the time that we were working so flexibly. Interestingly, I don't know if any of you follow Google Analytics, but one of their stats they put out is, where are we all? Physically, where are we? And over the last few weeks, we have, on average, as workers, been spending 3.5 days in office environments. That sounds like hybrid to me, but time will tell. So I've taken you through those 4 areas that occur to me to think about, and I suppose how would I wrap that up by what I think, what I envisage of the future? Well, first of all, I think it's hugely exciting. This is a pivot point to use the P word. It's a pivot point for us. We can take so much out of this. For sure, choice for the consumer is going to carry on. There's plenty of room in this market and there's plenty of options. We will supply our customers with choice and information, maybe too much, who knows, but we will give them plenty of that. And we as banks will use the technology and the things that we've learned over the last couple of years to be more efficient, effective and safe. I think the shape of the working model has still got time to land. I do think it will be hybrid in our industry predominantly. And I think most firms will find employees in the office slightly more than they're not, but we will see how that goes. I think our customers want more from us. In the future, I don't think they just want banking services. I also think they want to associate themselves with firms that can deliver good outcomes for them, but also play their part in society, who are able to help them tackle the big questions of the day. I think our employees will choose to work with firms that can help further what they want. both in their own personal experience, but also the career they want, and understanding that that career might look different to the path that I thought of when I started out, for example. One thing I am sure, though, our customers will still want us to help them, support them to a financial security that they aspire to, answer their questions and guide them through the financial issues that they have in their lives. And I also think that in the UK, simply one of the best financial services sectors in the world, we are all ready, able and willing to deliver that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Tracey. Great presentation. So many themes there that we can explore, of course, a bit later on throughout this session. But that's great. I'm not going to detain you because you need to get unwired. Because if you're late for your meeting, you're going to blame me, and I refuse to take the rap. Tracey, thank you so much. Okay, but there were quite a few themes there that Tracey outlined, and I like the prediction that she believes that the hybrid workforce is here to stay. It's something we're going to have to live with. Time will tell, but you know what? I'm inclined to agree with her. We cannot get away from it. It will be here, so get used to it. But look, let's move things along now, because loads of things to explore, such as evaluating the impact of the pandemic, impacting on people in different ways, but also establishing how to create a successful dynamic between the human and digital, a key ingredient in that hybrid workforce. Again, another one of these big themes. The experts are on hand to discuss them, because in a few moments we're going to hear from Gemma, Willman and Cheryl, Chiodi to hear what they have to say. Trust me, they've got lots to say. So brace yourself, strap yourself in with your seatbelt if you've got one. It's going to be one hell of an interesting ride. We'll join you again in a few moments. You're watching MoneyLIVE Autumn Festival, and what we're going to do now is kick off our discussion focusing on the shifting workforce of tomorrow. Now, we had a fantastic outline of the challenges that lie ahead and how companies are responding to them. We got that from our keynote speaker. We're going to take it a little bit further. It's a journey I can't make alone, so let me introduce Gemma, Willman and Cheryl, Chiodi. And what we're going to be discussing is the theme, how to manage a successful hybrid workforce. How do you manage a successful hybrid workforce? What we're going to do is we're going to cover everything from the changing workplace itself to reskilling and, of course, successfully orchestrating the human and the digital. Okay, so I'm going to back off just for a moment so that I can sit down. Back off, it makes me sound aggressive. I don't have any aggressive intentions. Let me state that now. But look, I'm going to get myself comfortably. That's great. So first up, Gemma, it's good to see you. Can you start by just telling the audience what it is that you do and for whom?
So, Gemma Willman, I work for NatWest Group. We have about 19 million customers in the UK. We're made up of a bunch of brands that perhaps you didn't know about, including RBS, Ulster Bank, Coutts, and a whole raft of others. I head up the workforce enablement function for about half of the bank, so for about 30,000 plus colleagues. And my role really is to make sure we have the right people in the right role at the right time at the right cost. And most importantly for today, with the right skills. And that is where we've seen a big change based on the pandemic, the hybrid working, and all of those good things. So that is where I am today. It's a tricky role, but I do love it.
Yeah, it's quite an empire that you have as well, isn't it?
I don't manage all of those.
No, thank goodness for clarifying that. But look, it's lovely to see you, and thank you so much for being here. And Cheryl, again, if you could do the same thing, just tell the audience what it is you do and for whom.
Sure, thank you. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me today. We're ABBYY, and we're a digital intelligence company globally working around the world to help financial institutions and other organizations really progress their digital transformation journeys. So I work in the financial services industry. I get to work with our financial services customers, our partners, analysts who look after this industry. And I really glean insights that help me to build our go-to-market strategy for financial services and take that into demand generation and customer journey building and really building our marketing messaging for financial services. So I'm really, really glad to be here too.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And just to give the audience a heads up as well, I know that you guys are going to use slides in answering your questions, okay? So you've got your clicker there.
Got it here.
Fantastic. I didn't see it for a second, so I thought it actually sprouted legs and run off. But look, thank you so much. Let's crack on because there is a lot of ground to cover. So Gemma, let me start with you.
Yes.
In fact, it's a question to both of you, but Gemma, if you can start and then Cheryl. Because, look, we've been talking about the impact of the pandemic on the workforce. It has been enormous, not just in financial services, but beyond. And, you know, of course, the big challenge going from working in an office to your home overnight, also having to rapidly adapt, not just to this different environment, but to the tools at the fingertip. But where are we now in this journey? And in what way is this new arrangement, for want of a better term, beneficial, not just to employers, but also employees, and focusing on the technical and operational side of things to begin with, if that just whittles it down?
Yes, and I'm sure everybody here likes a good stat. I know I do. So hence why we've got some slides here, because I think it's important to really draw out, certainly from a NatWest perspective, you know, the technical impact and what we needed to do to actually become that remote workforce in the first instance during the pandemic. So I thought I'd throw a few stats up for everybody and talk to a couple of them whilst we're here, because it is really quite groundbreaking, gobsmacking, all of those great words we've seen many times and heard many times on the news and on TV. But we had a 315% increase in remote working during the pandemic. And to give you a sense of scale, when we talk about these, I've got some figures up there, but you know, we are seeing and saw, you know, something in the region of 50,000 PCs issued. We saw something in the region of 40,000 Zoom calls undertaken during the day, and we wonder why we've got Zoom fatigue. There are an absolutely unbelievable number of remote working, IT kits, access, all of these types of things that need to be undertaken in order to make sure that NatWest, with 19 million customers, is functioning during a pandemic that we've never seen before. And that in its first instance is to ensure that we've got access as 60,000 colleagues to the right technology at the right level, notwithstanding the risk that you have to hackers, to new ways of accessing technology when we are working from home. So I think bringing up some of these stats really gives you a sense of scale of what we needed to do from an operational and technical perspective. A couple of other little facts that I thought were quite interesting. So prior to the pandemic, we had roughly about 10,000 people working from home. If those of you in the audience remember Beast from the East, we had about 16,000 during that period. We hit over 66,000 during the peak of the pandemic, and now we're roughly averaging 50,000. It's incredible the way we have changed to accommodate this. A couple of other things that I think is super interesting, and then we can move on. But you know, from a technical perspective as well, the engineering changes that we made to our tech stack to make sure that things like, the call center representatives, I've gone too far on the slides, the call center representatives were able to take those calls from home. Every single one of you in this audience would have called your bank at that time. What you didn't realise when you were frustrated about the time that it took for us to answer, whatever bank it may have been, is that we'd had to reroute and fundamentally change the back office processes, the platforms during critical peak times to accommodate that home working, that remote working from our call centres. We also had to move quite quickly and accelerate quite quickly on our collaboration tools, so Zoom, Office 365, Teams, and so on and so forth. So just to give you a sense of scale, operationally, 95% of our branches stayed open. I know that our dear friend just a second ago said 100% of hers did, but I think the scale is somewhat different. I think we're up towards the 1,000 mark. That in itself is a big deal. There was a lot of effort required, both technically but also emotionally, for those staff to keep them open. All of our cash centres remained open, and just from an operational perspective, finally, for those of you who are familiar with operational risk, we invoked our group operational incident management across the whole bank from February 2020, and we only just recently closed it down, so that shows you the significance from an operational perspective.
And Cheryl, would you like to respond to this? Because these numbers are pretty sort of gobsmacking in their own right, really, but the 95%, especially for a bank of this size.
They truly are. I mean, it's just, we've seen the word unprecedented used so many times, but I think there's a reason why that word has been so overused, because these numbers are just staggering. It's almost like you can't comprehend numbers like this. And when Gemma talks about having to reorchestrate an entire back office, I mean, she just says it as if it's, pouring a cup of coffee in the morning. This is something that is just fundamental to the way a financial institution works. And it's the way that ABBYY is helping our financial services customers understand the processes that they're currently using so that they can make leaps forward like that to fundamentally change an entire process like that. All the while serving customers who are incredibly anxious and nervous about so many things that are changing beneath their feet. You ask about rapid change. I'm not sure any of us have ever experienced change that's been so rapid. I mean, I haven't been to London since Sibos of 2019, and I can't tell you my experience in traveling here, the required documents I had to go through, the testing procedures, and I'm speaking as an employee who has to go through things that are very emotional to make a work trip that was historically quite common. So we're all changing. The rapid change is happening even still. ABBYY conducted a survey, and 69% of the financial services organizations that we spoke to said that they expect that 60% or more of their staff is going to remain remote. So, as Tracey said in the keynote, it remains to be seen. We don't have a crystal ball, but that's what the expectation is. We've all proven that we can react and respond and deliver exceptional services regardless of whether we're physically in an office. So what Gemma and I are here to talk about is this notion of the hybrid workforce. So how do we make sure that there are opportunities for those who want to return to a physical space, and that we leave the door open for those who are quite comfortable staying in the remote situation.
And from my perspective as the outsider looking in, the idea that a bank could respond so quickly, because look, go back to that time, we didn't know if we would go into lockdown because there appeared to be some vacillation on the part of the government, but the fact that you did it, to have 95% of those branches actually up and running, a great achievement. But, the numbers, they look great, but Gemma, where does well-being fit into this? Because that's equally important as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a forgive me on the slides, I obviously haven't prepped properly on the, the use of your...
There's nothing wrong with the prep, trust me, it's going well. Don't worry.
So look, I think well-being is, actually it's been discussed so much, in both the office, across the executives, in the news, amongst ourselves. But I think it cannot be underestimated, the acute impact that it had on everybody from a well-being perspective. I think it really impacted everybody in a different way. But I think if you look at the curve or the change curve, right, I think you'll see a lot of people really leaning in, across the world, but typical Brit style, we'll lean straight in, we will love a challenge, and we'll rally around a problem, and we'll put every effort in and more. And actually what I think then started to happen, if you look at the stats from surveys, people were up on how they felt about their company, but then the exhaustion hit, the mental health issues hit, the way in which, we sort of, got to lockdown number 3 in isolation, really hit on a lot of our decision making, and actually the blur between home, we were talking about this earlier, the blur between home and work has I mean, the good side is that we get to see a human side. Husband walking behind us in pants, little child coming and giving us kisses, and those sorts of things. But actually, the delineation now is not there. The journey home is not there. The time spent reading or doing something different in that commute is not there, and it's hard. It's very hard on all of us.
That's true. But clearly, what you did, you established a model which was working, and you're absolutely right that you have to take into account the mental health support to those who are actually involved in keeping that model going in times of phenomenal challenge, especially, as you rightly said, the second lockdown, or was it the third? There seem to be so many, it's very easy to lose count. Yeah. But the actual structure is working, and what I'm getting at is, are you going to take this into the future? Does this set the template for where you're going post-COVID-19, post-pandemic?
So look, we're never going to go back to where we were before. I was in the office 5 days a week. I've been in a couple of days a week this last few weeks, and actually it's exhausting, number one. And number two, I find I'm not as productive because when we're at home, I feel like we can run between meetings quite quickly. We get a lot done. I think the way in which we have sort of segmented our workforce as per the slides that you see in front of us is the first of many iterations. We talk about test and learn in an agile technology companies, and we are as banks, right? I think that's clear now. We are all technology companies, no matter where you are. We all need to have a digital first approach. We all need to be able to reach anybody and everybody, any place. And therefore, we must make sure that we understand our customers, but also our colleagues. And I think what we've done here is segment our workforce based on the work that they do. So if you're a knowledge, so remote first, hybrid working, and office first. If you're a knowledge worker, you're probably going to be mostly at home, maybe in the office once or twice a week. If you're a hybrid worker, that means that you're dealing with clients, you have some customers, that sort of interaction with your client base is necessary, but not in the office all the time. So you're in and out of the office frequently, but not sitting at a desk per se. Office first, or in a building first, is very much where you have to be for either regulatory reasons or because you are a cash teller, for instance. You need to be in the office permanently. Each one of those different segmented segments of our workforce has individual tech needs, has individual well-being needs, and has individual communication needs. And that's important to note. They're all different based on where you are, and that's because you need to have that feeling of purpose and inclusion and human interaction. And so you have to scale some of them up or some of them down, depending on where and what you're sort of allocated to. Is this the end of it? Absolutely not.
I thought you were putting that question to me for a second. No, you're not going yet. I haven't finished with you. Stay where you are. But look, I mean, what we see there is where NatWest is in the journey. But Cheryl, from your perspective, what's your take on where we are now? And more to the point, the rapid changes that we've experienced in the last 18 or so months. Is it possible to know where we're going? Because clearly it's going to mean different things to different banks. There can be no one-size-fits-all on this.
No, you're right. There can't be a one-size-fits-all. And I love that Gemma's done this segmentation and really understanding the ways different people work. And I think, when we talk about bringing technology in, like Abby's technology to really help solve the problems, we have to be cautious of just throwing technology at a problem and hoping that that's the solution, right? The survey I was referring to that Abby conducted said that 73% of the financial services institutions we talked to said that they brought in new technology during the pandemic. And maybe there wasn't proper rollout, maybe there wasn't proper integration, maybe some of the things we've touched on here about someone's well-being wasn't considered when we were bringing that technology in. So I think the keys to, the customers, I think Tracey did a great job of bringing that in, that the whole reason we all have our jobs, the reason why financial services exist is because there are customers. And we have to think about those customers being at the center of every problem that we're solving. But behind happy customers are happy employees, right? So I'm so happy to hear that Gemma has done all this work to really think about the employees and what it's going to take. And I don't think it's about just throwing the next technology at them. Understanding, Juliet, as you said, understanding what the processes are before we just try to fix them. I think a lot of financial institutions think they may know what their processes are because they put Post-it notes up in a conference room and we all agree that this is the process we go through. But is it really? So, we have tools that can help us understand what the real process is, what the as is, where there are bottlenecks, where we can streamline things, where maybe we can have a digital worker take a bit of that process from a human knowledge worker so that we can elevate that human to doing more satisfying work and bring in the robots where they're necessary. So rapid change, dramatic change. The slide you're seeing here is part of the survey I keep referring to. So happy to share that with anyone in greater detail. But that's, I think, where we're seeing that rapid shift.
And look, when we're talking about technology, we look at it in a very generalist way. Yes, technology per se assisted the challenge, Cheryl, but specifically, what role did the new technologies play in facilitating this shift? Because I guess that they needed to be grafted onto the existing architecture to really take it up into the fifth gear with such a shrinking window.
Yeah, I think that's a great word, grafted, right? So how do we integrate new technologies, use API calls, use web services, really, and think about democratizing technology so that you don't have to be a developer to really start to embrace technology. So we talk a lot about the citizen developer and being able to really put the solutions in the hands of the everyday business user who's closest to what the problem is. So I think that's the way we've been able to graft these solutions in, is to democratize them and give them to the business user, what we call citizen developers, through low-code and no-code solutions, which I think is the key to the future and really bringing us all into the digital organization that you're talking about, digital first.
And let's stay with that idea, Gemma, because look, the bottom line is that I guess that in many ways, even if you don't work in technology, we've all become technologists. I mean, I doubt that most of us has actually heard of Zoom until we had to use it. I certainly hadn't heard of it, but now it's part of my working life, it's part of my vocabulary. But at the same time, in an organisation like a bank that is highly, highly structured, you are technology dependent. So how are you actually going to nurture the talent to make that technology work best for you at speed? What I'm focusing on here is the reskilling, or indeed the upskilling, that's necessary to make this happen. I mean, I guess that to make this hybrid environment work, you've got to be able to prepare people for this very quickly. Are you setting timelines? What are you doing? Can you set timelines?
Great question and great observation. I think so. Yes, is the short answer. I referred to it earlier there is not one single company I can think of. Even my gardener is a tech company now, because that's how he gets his business in the main. We are all tech companies. We all need data. We all need to understand that data and be able to use it in a way that is the most efficient and effective to answer our customers' needs. What does that mean? So what does it mean to a bank of 60,000 people or so? It means that we need to identify quite quickly, through the skills lens, what the business needs to do to answer the questions, queries, needs of our customers, communities, and colleagues. And then we need to understand through a skills lens what we have today, which is why I talk very much about strategic workforce planning. So that's supply and demand view. Where do we have a gap? What do we need to do? And then what we need to really quite quickly do is understand at a skills level where we need to go, where we need to reskill, where we have pockets of the organisation that frankly will be automated, digitised, whatever the word is that you want to use, and proactively put opportunities for them to learn these new skills. we're not asking everybody to become a principal engineer in the matter of sort of 3 or 4 days. But what we are doing, and I think what we all have an obligation to do, recognizing what's just happened, is to become proficient in technology, in the skills you need to have to develop technology, to understand technology, and similarly in that data space, data science. I'm not expecting anybody to be a data scientist, but what we do need to do is recognize how we use data to make better informed decisions. Yeah. And so with that as a kind of mantra, for want of a better word, we have specific reskilling programs for certain pockets of the organisation that we have proactively identified that could, in theory, become junior software developers, that could, in theory, become the first sort of level within cybersecurity or whatever the critical skill may be. We also have specific reskilling, and to much success, this one that's just landed, where we took 20 folks out of what we call the front office, so people who deal with customers on a day-to-day basis, be it call centres or cash or premier bankers or relationship managers, whatever it may be. These guys that have the most amount of knowledge about our customers, the problems, the fraud, we were talking about fraud and all these sorts of things that have escalated right now. They're on the phones to the customers, they hear it firsthand. And we've put them through a 6-month reskilling course to make them junior software engineers and think of all of the information. We talk about technology and delivery, in an agile way, and we talk about making sure that the business requirements are right in the heart of where we develop and release that technology. That's what we're doing. We're bringing those guys into the bank. We're giving them the opportunity, in this instance, to be junior software engineers, but there are a raft of other types of opportunities springing up across the organisation. So I think skills, what skills do you have, critically important. What skills do you need, critically important, not only to deliver your portfolio of work for your customers, but actually for the future. What is the environment, what is the economy telling you? And then really, really crucially looking at what practical things can you do to help your organisation, the skills you have on site, the people you have on site, to build those skills for the future. Mm.
So this is certainly something which COVID facilitated. I'm sure it was happening before, but perhaps it really magnified it, the importance. And something interesting comes out of what you said, Gemma, and I'd like you, Cheryl, to address it. In fact, Tracey alluded to it, and it's that balance between the human and the digital, because what you're striving for is a dynamic where you've got this rather happy coexistence. But what does that dynamic look like in reality? We know how we imagine it to be, but it's when it's practiced. What does it look like? And can you actually strike that successful balance with the human and the digital? Because, come on, let's be clear about this. A lot of people out there think, you know what, digital's going to take over my job, that the human will be redundant because it becomes a robot world, a robotic world.
Yeah, no, I think it's all about balance. Balance is the perfect word, and it's about human in the loop reconciliation. So there are many tasks that are repetitive in nature, that are, we don't need our human skilled workers to participate in, and we can take the digital and we can offload that work, but you can't replace the human empathy, the ability for the human to interact. You spoke about the frontline customers and really understanding, especially during these challenging times. So we need to be able to allow our skilled human workers to do the jobs that they're so good at, and then offload the more manual, the more repetitive tasks, offload those to digital workers so that we strike a balance and we keep our employees happy. We keep them motivated to come to work. We take away those types of activities that have been mundane and demotivating.
Business processes.
Please, just follow it through.
It's just why that business process mapping is so crucial, because that gives us that base level understanding of what is repetitive, what can we digitize, what can we automate, and then give them the good work that we've talked about, that needs the empathy, that needs the adaptability, that needs the critical thinking, all of the things that we enjoy being problem-solving part of. That's the human part of where we interact in tech and data, and that's what we really should be pushing towards, and that's the opportunity actually that COVID has given us.
And shouldn't we also be pushing towards the idea of having a hybrid workforce that, yes, we recognise how vital it is, but there is a balance within that between flexibility and efficiency? I mean, again, how can you get that? Because to the outsider looking in, it seems like the ultimate holy grail.
I think it's going to be a test and learn for use of an agile term, right? I think we've all got very good intentions, but I don't think that anybody should be thinking they've solved it today. This is a pandemic that has just happened. I think we've put protocols in place. I think we know what we need to do. I think we've segmented our workforce. We've got business processes. There are lots of things that we are actively part of right now, but I think to Tracey's point, we're not there yet. We have an indication that it will be 60% hybrids, working from home, working in the office. I think we have a long way to go to understand what collaboration actually means. Collaborating between people on a screen with people in an office doesn't work. So we are global teams. So I think it's clear that people are not quite there with what hybrid working means, but we need to get there and we need to nail it.
Yeah, to understand that definition. And look, I want to pick up on a D word that you used, Cheryl. I'm going through the alphabet because I was pivoting and I'm actually talking democratization because look, democratization as applied to automation and AI. Again, what is it? What should it look like in reality? And how is that increasing accessibility actually impacting on the innovation that's taking place and also employee engagement?
Yeah, I think what happens is it can really help to expedite innovation. So democratization isn't a new thing. You know, we used to be coding on blue screens and you had to have a high skill set to even start to understand. And then we brought in graphical user interfaces and technology was more in the hands of more people. Well, we're just taking that another step with low code and no code software applications. And really, instead of having waterfall processes where technology people talk to business people and get a set of requirements and go away for 6 months and come back and say, oh, I built what you wanted, and say, no, this is what I wanted 6 months ago, it's not what I want today, and go back and try again, right? Now we're removing that barrier. We're putting the technology in the hand of the business user who knows what the outcomes are that they're striving to achieve. We're doing that with low code, no code applications, and we're really bringing in more innovation because we're allowing those people who are closest to the business challenges that we're trying to solve really solve them with these low-code and no-code tools.
Now, time is running very, very tight, so I would appreciate it if both of you can be brief on this. But look, the final question, because we talk about happy employees make for happy customers. I mean, look, is that true from what you're seeing? Are we seeing employees who are like really happy because they're using technology and they're just feeling great? They've got the hybrid arrangement, etc. Is it coming through to the customers, and how is it impacting on that relationship? I mean, are the two completely linked, or is it a fantastic piece of fiction that somebody has concocted out of somewhere?
They're certainly not divorced, put it that way.
So they are married.
They are indeed. And I genuinely do think that a happy workforce does make for a happy customer. If that is as brief as I can be, there are many reasons for it, but it is absolutely right. And that is now today nailing this hybrid, making sure that we're answering the colleagues' needs as much as the customers.
Okay, and Cheryl?
I couldn't agree more. I think there's a direct correlation to your employee satisfaction and the customer satisfaction. I read a McKinsey report where we're just starting to do kind of some persona work on employees, the way we've been doing customer persona work for years. And I think it's about time because we really need to understand who our employees are and what their challenges are. The back office revamping that Gemma spoke about, the customer needs to not know that happened, right? They need to feel a seamless interaction and not even know that you just went through this huge back office rearrangement. So I definitely would say yes, there's a direct correlation and we need to pay more attention to it than we have in the past. Okay,
we're going to have to leave it there, but Cheryl and Gemma, thank you so much. It really has been a very entertaining session. And the moral of the story to everybody is keep happy, okay? You want happy customers, make sure your team are happy. But look, don't go away yet because, look, we were talking about automation and that's something which our next guest feels very passionately about, Noam Zeigerson from Tandem Money. The question he's going to be looking at is how far can automation go? Now, we touched on it, but how far should it be allowed to go, perhaps? Big question. If you want to know the answer, stay with us to find out more. Thank you. Welcome, if you've just joined us, because it is the MoneyLIVE Autumn Festival, and I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Noam Zeigerson. Now, there's a lot to get through, but what we're looking at is automation. We alluded to it shortly before the break, so it's very, very good to see you. And I know that it's a subject which you're very passionate about. So let's crack on, because before we start, we'll do the usual thing. If you could very briefly introduce yourself to the audience by telling them what it is you do and for whom.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here in person. I'm Noam. I'm running tech, product, and data for Tandem. I started X years ago building a startup company in analytics, doing mainly turnkey projects, fixed-price projects for big corporates, from business discovery, information discovery, then building some analytical solution around campaign management or risk management. We've did a lot of sectors, but the ones I always loved the most were retail banking. Need to admit. Then we sold that business and I've started another startup. This time it was software as a service for artificial intelligence. The idea was how we take the digital marketing space and just build an AI of a marketeer who will personalize campaigns and personalize experience for customers. We launched in North America, really had amazing results, quite a lot of challenges, as we're going to speak about. And then I got a really surprise proposal to join as a chief data officer for a very big legacy traditional bank. I was a bit, it was weird, why me? And they said, because we want to build AI of a banker. Really, like, what did I miss? After understanding how much traditional banks are worried from fintech and from the tsunami of disruption on financial services, I understood there is a real opportunity here. And joined, and within 3 years we introduced dozens of AI-driven use cases in that bank. But again, it was hard to scale. Banking is a very complicated model and very complicated environment. And then I had this opportunity to join Tandem, one of the first neo-challenger banks here in London, who actually build everything from scratch, build all banking in fully digital way, build for the future, build for scale, build for fully automated. And that's what we're doing in the last years.
So it satisfies every challenge. I mean, look, thank you so much for that, because look, you're a veteran of this. So as a veteran, address this question. Where is automation being used most frequently and, above all, successfully?
Yeah, so I would divide this into banking and non-banking. So non-banking, we all know, ed tech, marketing, advertisement, where the money sits. We saw a lot of automation coming from campaign management and really automating the engagement with customers across the funnel of acquisition, cross-sell, upsell. That was quite clear. We all were a part of that as customers. In banking, surprisingly, it started very strong in the fin crime space. So fighting fraud, fighting money laundering, all the space that really banks had, both from compliance, governance perspective, but also to keep the reputation and to keep the safety of their customers, to invest. And we saw big data and AI automation solutions really hitting hard on the fin crime space, and that was really, really great. So that I would say was the start. Of course, a lot to be done more.
Sure, but what about the pandemic itself? How did that impact on the adoption of automation?
So I think we heard also along the day here, I think a lot of the things we were not expecting is banking operations. All those teams behind the scene doing all the operations around payments, around underwriting, stuff that were not necessarily customer facing, now had to be sorted as part of work from home, work remotely, and introducing much more tooling and automations for the back office and the back end side of banking. That was really, really a good opportunity to make a jump.
And let's focus on straight through automation, because look, there are challenges with everything, but what are the challenges there in terms of implementing end-to-end automated processes? And how do you actually overcome them to make the whole process smooth, ultimately to satisfy the customer so that he or she feels they've gone through something seamless?
I would say there are two main steps. First step is the data sources. Eventually, when you want to automate, you need to get the flow of data for the process. And some of the data are unstructured or semi-structured. You need to scan data. Some data comes from third parties that you need to integrate with. So, being able to get those data source automations is an essential part of that. The second one is actually finding the algorithms behind the process, understanding what are the decision steps and how can we make them programmatically so we can actually take an end-to-end decision process and automate all of it. In many cases, the process is distributed from a variety of policies and functions and authorities, and to actually structure it and automate it is the first challenge to go.
And look, let's take it a step further. Automation, great, but what is intelligent automation? I mean, is there a difference between automation and intelligent automation? And more to the point, why is IA such a game changer?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, Juliet. I think that when you are not doing an intelligent automation, you just automate, digitize process. What we all see, both as customers and as organizations, that the customer pay the price, right? They are now stuck into an automated, predefined process they can't really engage with. When you want it to be intelligence, you want it to actually to be more personalized, you want it to be more responsive to behavioral, to environmental changes, and you cannot have it with those stiff rules because then you just lose business and you upset customers.
Okay, so given that difference, how can banks make that leap to intelligent automation? In fact, I don't just want you to consider that bit, that's obviously important, but within that, how do you actually deploy it? How should you phase that deployment? And what are the key considerations? Because yes, it's all very well and good having this thing that it's sensitive to environmental issues, the things which matter the most to the customers, but it's not that easy to implement.
That's correct. We need to remember that banks are running a risk management business. Eventually, what is bank? You're managing the risk of saving someone's money while lending it to another and getting the money back and being resilient and reliable for money. So you manage risk. And in order to create this intelligent, artificial intelligence or intelligent automation, you want to create the controls, you want to create the risk framework to allow you to trust machines to do more on the decisioning side. So at the bottom line, it's back to basic, how much we trust the data, how much we control and own the data flow, so we can then safely and securely build intelligent automations on top of very robust and resilient data framework. So all the controls and all the monitoring is in place, and then banks can feel more comfortable to take it a step further and further.
Yeah, because there is an urgency attached to all this, because it's not just how banks are using it to transform their own operations, they're also responding to the customers as well, because we as individuals, when we're managing our money or managing other money-related transactions, we're using digital tools to help it. We need that rapidity of service to actually make everything as seamless as possible, especially as we found during that pandemic. But at the end of the day, there are the employees, they've got to make it happen as well. What I'm getting at is the risk that in embracing all of this technology, you strip workers of their sense of empowerment because they feel limited by technology.
Yeah, I met some cases where that was really a big concern. I think everyone needs to remember that it is all people who shape the proposition to customers. On one side, there are people they called customers. On the other side, there are people who are the employees of the brand, of the company, who shape the proposition. So while people might think, oh, we lost touch with our customers because it's all digital, actually what you really need to do is to bring yourself into the technology, to bring your creativity, your ideas into the digital proposition, so then customers can really benefit and really enjoy your services. So eventually, yes, the space has changed. We're not any more or less talking to customers on the physical space. It's more virtual, but it's still the same services. Yeah, in a different way of serving them, but you really need to apply yourself to get them properly served.
Yeah, because I guess that the danger is that the employees are made to feel as if, okay, here is this piece of technology, you're just there to deliver it. So it's changing the dynamic of that relationship. So you feel, as a member of staff, that you're shaping the design of these new technologies, helping to phase them in. And that's the trick. I guess that's the responsibility of employers. How do you make your staff feel that they're not just part of a delivery system? Because at the end of the day, if it's not working, you need their input.
Exactly. And we see a lot of banks, not only neobanks, challenger banks like Tandem, but a lot of very big traditional banks building those digital factories and building big cross-functional teams and organization of tribes around credit or around spending. So bringing people to work in cross-functional and understanding that actually, if you really want to solve people's problem, you need to take a cross-functional team to look at the problem. You need to give a very clear outcome and then allow cross-functional people across the business to contribute with ideas, with knowledge, with support to actually deliver this outcome to customers. So it's all about, again, bringing this knowledge, this creativity from across the bank, from across the company, and putting the customer in the center of the solution we've built.
So let's close this out by looking at the future, because we have a vision of a world of perfect automation. But how do you see the role of humans in banking evolving? Like, can you actually have a good balance, a good accommodation between the machine working with the human?
Absolutely, yes. I have no doubt we can't really make it only based on artificial intelligence. I saw this more than once, that if you give an AI to control the engagement with customers, you get all kind of weird stuff. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's less, but you miss something. And this is where AI, machines, and people must have the interface to work together. We must get people bring their creativity, creating campaigns, creating proposition, creating all kind of insights to customers, and then a machine be able to bridge the gap with millions of customers that consuming that. So it's really about hand in hand, people bringing the heart, the creative side, and machine bringing the execution, the intelligent, the analytical side of how to distribute it to the right people in the right channel, in the right time, and that's what probably we will evolve into.
Fantastic, and it happens to feed into the theme of our next discussion. We're going to be looking at the employee experience, operational strategy, the bank branch of the future, and so much more. So Noam, thank you so much for that really fascinating discussion. Also, laying the foundations where we take this whole thing in the next part of the session. But look, we'd like you, our audience, to stay with us, because we're going to hear from three panelists, Vinita Ramtri, Jamie Broadbent, and Nikunj Lukka. Please forgive me for that mispronunciation. But look, some really interesting things are coming up in a few moments. Please make sure that you stay with us. Thank you. are watching the MoneyLIVE Autumn Festival, we're coming to our final discussion of this session. Remote, hybrid, local, that is the question. The future of work. Plenty of ground to cover, so let's hit that ground running by meeting our speakers. First up, Vinita Ramtri, good to see you. You know the drill. If you can introduce yourself to the audience by telling them what it is you do and for whom.
Thank you. So, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Great, thank you. So I work for HSBC, and on my profile or wherever else, you would have probably seen that I head up risk for HSBC Kinetic, which a lot of you might be familiar with on the underground because the adverts are on now. It's small business banking. But in my current role, so I've just recently also changed roles. In my current role, I head up API standards and governance, so complete, I can't say a complete departure from risk, but a segue from risk. So I'm looking after wholesale banking, you know, API propositions and security standards governance.
Thank you so much. You're very casual the way that you say that, as if it's no big deal. I mean, this is like serious stuff. But look, thank you so much for that. Jamie Broadbent, it's great to see you. The same thing. If you can introduce yourself to the audience by telling them what it is you do and for whom.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. So I'm Jamie. I head up digital innovation and design for RBS International. RBS International is the international part of NatWest Group. And it's great to be here with you all.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you. Now, I apologised before we had a slight break when we were shifting the furniture, but Nikunj has forgiven me. He says I can call him Nick, which is what everybody calls you. But look, it's fantastic to see you. So again, the same thing. If you could tell everybody what it is you do and for whom.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Nick, or Nikunj. I am currently at Octopus Wealth. I joined there literally 2 weeks ago, where I'm head of operations. Previously, and for the last 5 years prior to this, I was at Tandem Bank, so where Noam was just from, and heading up operational strategy and change for Tandem.
Okay, well, look, it's fantastic to see all of you, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedules to be here. Someone had to draw the short straw on the first question. And sorry, Vinita,
You pushed me here.
That's why he did it, because you've got the first question. But look, there has been so much happening. I don't think it's an over-exaggeration to say that we've seen some seismic shifts happening in the way that we work in workplaces in general, the culture and so on. But from your perspective, how do you think the pandemic has so far affected the employee experience?
I think it depends on whether we're talking about the experience during the pandemic or the experience as in now, right? So it has, of course, very deeply impacted everyone. But the way I would see it is there is not a one-size-fits-all. So some people have really found that space to do things that they would have maybe liked to do or discover different ways. There are people who've really found a way to fitness and other sort of hobbies or passions, or even decided to change careers completely, versus some others have found it really difficult to deal with it, right? And I would say most of the people come in the latter section, and I'm meeting with a lot of people as we speak. So yes, it has impacted everyone really deeply, and to what my, what the previous speakers were saying, the important part has been about not just looking after yourself during that time, but looking after yourself and I mean, I'm a single mom. I've got the 2 kids, so there's the 2 children there, along with the customers, along with your team, and everything else. You know, I've got parents in Pune, and Pune was one of the worst struck, right? So if you combine all of that, the impact to every individual has been really unique, and I think that's the big part, right? And coming out of it, everyone's journeys. We might say it's huge, but it's also very different.
Sure. And coming out of that, Jamie, we've got a good idea about how the pandemic affected people as individuals. But if you're working in financial services, the pressure, the change, having to pivot. But then how did that impact, in turn, the customer experience because of that shift from hybrid against digital versus human interactions, etc.? What did it do? How did we see this really showing itself in the relationship with customers?
Yeah, so I certainly would echo that it impacted everybody, and we were all in it together, but it impacted customers in very different ways, right? So digital became the only channel for engaging with the bank, and some customers adapted to that just fine. Some needed some hand-holding. And for others, the impacts were huge because they, going into the pandemic, they had a viable job or a viable business, and in some instances lost that overnight. And so for the first time, they were scared about, well, how am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to meet my loan obligations? How am I going to feed my family? And so, even though the bank became digital only, it needed to be more human than it had ever been in order to kind of treat people in an empathetic way and serve them based on what their needs were. And I guess that cemented for us that vision that, look, in the future, this is what banking is going to be. It's digital first, and that's going to stay for the long haul, but it has to remain human all the way through. It's not an either or, but a both, as was previously discussed.
Because what it points to, Nick, is change. It's a long process, and it will be very challenging in its own way, but at the same time, you need to make sure that your team, they never lose their enthusiasm for it. So that's the point. How do you think organisations can actually sustain the enthusiasm that's there, or perhaps reinvigorate it so that everybody can feel comfortable going on this journey together?
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. And I think firstly, and echoing what the other panellists have said, you've got to recognise the drivers for change and what the pandemic's done, right? So it's forced banks in particular to think about creating automation to reduce their costs, but also increasing resilience because you're not going to have all your teams together or in person anymore. And I think increasingly as well, as Jamie was saying, from a customer perspective, you want to drive self-serve, right? So those are some of the drivers we need to consider. In terms of then how you motivate your teams, a lot of this is about the basics, right? So it's people and culture. And what I mean by that is you still have to create an environment where you're delivering change sympathetically to people, recognizing the fact that this has been a brutal period for many people. So that's number one. Number two is there's a huge reward and recognition component to this. And I think organizations are having to recognize the fact that many of their people have gone above and beyond to keep the lights on for their customers in the last 18 months. And actually, in order to retain that enthusiasm, the motivation, as you deliver more change, you need to ensure your people are on board. So I think reward and recognition is key. And then I think the third thing here is about embedding, because delivering change now in a post-pandemic world is going to be very different to how it was pre-pandemic. You can't rely on, like I said, teams all being together. The way that you deliver training, your post-life support, all of that's going to be very different. And I think organisations need to consider all three components, and like I say, those drivers for change in terms of how they keep their people enthused.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, Jamie, what we're talking about is constructing a new architecture. It was forced on us by COVID-19. And the bottom line is that, digital tools, they are part and parcel of that foundation. They're in the DNA of this new architecture, whatever it's going to be. But the question is, what are the tools that you can implement to support the worker in his or her day-to-day communications and also project management? Are there specific tools here?
Yeah, sure thing. So in terms of day-to-day engagement, I think I heard you say earlier, Julia, like pre-pandemic, you didn't know what Zoom was, and now it's become kind of part of your daily routine, right? And that's true for everybody. The future of the workforce, we're still going to have to engage and interact, and people want to see each other, right? So video is a permanent feature, and that's not going away anytime soon. I think one of the things that we have lost a little bit is that social interaction, right? People being able to see what others are working on, give each other high fives, all that kind of stuff. And so, one of the themes that we see emerging is this almost like Facebook for work, right? And so we use that internally within RBS International. It's a social platform where people can kind of share pictures, share what they're working on, run polls, et cetera, et cetera. Again, I think that's going to be a key theme. I think one of the tools that probably needs some work right now is the off button, right? The ability to disconnect. Because what we've done is we've empowered people to work, anytime, anywhere, which becomes all the time, everywhere. And if you drove a lorry on British roads, like there would be a cap that you hit, at which point you have to pull over, you can't drive any further. Now, burnout is not a badge of honor, and I think one of the things that we need to do in the go forward hybrid, work environment is figure out the tools that will help people disconnect. so that they're able to recharge and get that work-life balance right. And I think it's incumbent on employers to kind of innovate in that space.
Yeah, and Nikunj, let's follow that up, because look, at the end of the day, you cannot be one size fits all. Every person is different. They've got their own strengths and weaknesses, all that sort of stuff. So just how important is it to make sure that the digital tools that we have, they are effectively tailored to the individual employee so that he or she is working with it successfully. They don't feel that if it's dragging them down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, firstly, it's about recognising the differences in people's roles. So that term, one size fits all, is appropriate here, right? Because depending on your role, you're going to have different requirements and different needs. So the tooling has to support you in doing that. And we've talked a lot today about hybrid working, right? So we also need to think about the fact that we need tools that support us when we're working from home and when we're working individually. But at the same time, you also then need to think about the fact that you're going to have teams that are dispersed. So you're going to have some people at home, some people in the office. And therefore, you don't want to be in a situation where your tooling is forcing you to be on Zoom all day if you're in the office, right? So you've got to think about it more pragmatically as well. I think what this really comes down to as well is understanding, going back to my earlier point, is the requirements of people in their roles. So in some roles, it's actually like, it's quite important you have collaboration tools because of the nature, let's say you're a developer or you're a business process analyst or whatever that is, and that's incredibly important. And actually in other roles, it's probably not as critical to your role because of the nature of what you do. And so therefore, I think it's really incumbent on organizations that they actually think about their people, what they do, but also what their requirements are. Because if they try and just force something in, from a top-down perspective, when has that ever worked before?
Yeah, and there's a nice follow-on to this, which is where you come into this, Vinita, because look, if you want to have these programs which are tailored to needs, it means that you've got to be prepared to dig into your pocket and invest. And that's the point. How do you measure and indeed understand the ROI when you're investing in those digital tools? Because you want to help your team, you want them to progress, because at the end of the day, you're using digital to help with their emotional well-being.
I think absolutely, and if I really come back to the ROI, it would depend on whether we're talking hard dollars or if we're also talking about just well-being, and converting that. If I were to look at key metrics, frankly, from an ROI perspective, the first bit would be that we would look for employees who kind of relate and resonate with the firm, right, the values. And after that, you want to retain them. So that's one of the biggest ROIs, right? Saying, okay, here's an employee who's happy, who finds the perfect balance for them, regardless of whether they're working in China, in Hong Kong, in the UK, or in India, wherever in the world. They feel this is a firm that understands me, understands my role, understands my unique circumstances, and I want to remain. That, for me, is the biggest ROI, right? We're talking about, happy people means happy customers. And going back to the previous conversation, then that means better technology, because that's when I can bring my best creativity into what I'm doing, right? So the ROI is in all those sort of softer methods rather than, I wouldn't probably look at, we invested X amount in Zoom and we have X amount of calls, but more about what does it mean? And the so what? So people love being here, and so we're attracting talent, we're retaining talent, and that's what it's all about. And of course, the customer side, of course. But when I'm talking about the employee picture, that's what it means.
Sure, and it also means, Jamie, really streamlining processes as well, so that you can actually have that happy balance with the technology, because it's adapted to individual needs. But where can processes be further streamlined? And is there a particular example that stands out for you where it's been done successfully?
Yeah, so I think in terms of where things can still be streamlined, I read a study just the other day from Adobe that said that the average UK office worker spends 6 hours a day engaging with emails. Now, whether that's reading them, writing them, rewriting them, trying to understand the tone that somebody was implying, regretting them, recalling them, you name it. Now, emails do not deliver great customer experiences. They don't propel organizations forward. And so I think one of the areas that is prime for disruption in a better way is displacing how we communicate across organizations. And we see collaboration tools like Slack, like Instant Messenger, that are now permeating even legacy organizations. But I think we're going to see a different way of communicating. Even when I observe my kids, right? Like, I will sit there and type, whereas they will use speech to text, right? Because they're like, why would you waste that effort? They'll send each other voice notes and short video messages. And I think that the platforms and the technology are there now for us to engage and collaborate in very different ways. So I look forward to the rapid decline of email.
It is actually quite scary when you look at how children interact with technology, because it makes us feel like dinosaurs if we're parents. But I mean, Vinita, it doesn't really matter if we're talking about reskilling or upskilling. Clearly, education is the key to this. But where do you think employees most seriously need that support? Can it be pinned down to specific areas?
I think it absolutely can. The only thing, though, I would probably say is, yes, it can be pinned down to the degree of one, right? Saying as Vinita, her individual education need is X. But in whatever we've been through in the past few years, I think the variation has become pretty large. So you know, if you and I were working in the office, Juliet, we probably have the same environment, similar issues, saying, okay, the culture needs change, right? But if we're at home, we're probably in like 4 or 20 complete different environments. We have, you know, that variation sort of changes very much. So yes, we can articulate to a great degree of detail what the requirement is, but the requirement could vary significantly. So similar to like what Dell would do, you know, tailor your particular kit down to that level. I would say even with training, it's a case of saying my individual learning needs are X. And I can tell you as an example, so I'm also a coach and a trainer, so I've delivered a lot of soft skills courses throughout the organization. I do like imposter syndrome, finding your purpose, well-being, and people find that beneficial, right? But in my new role, I would probably say, hey, you know, I want some more exposure to tech because I'm coming from risk, I'm coming into APIs, I have complete different need, right? So I would say we shouldn't probably say one size fits all, but give people that optionality to say, here you go, here's your entire skill set, here's what the future looks like, and by the way, you're going to play a role in designing that future. Because a lot of times I think we just take it for granted, saying the future will design itself and I have to fit in. And that makes us feel powerless, I think. We should think we have a role to play. So what do you want to do? What do you want to learn? And then I would say pick and mix.
I mean, I want to go back on a point actually, Nick, because look, throughout this strand of the conversation, what we're leading up to is finding ways of actually keeping your staff, because every company needs to avoid that churn. So you can use the technology constructively. But how do you actually construct a pipeline where you bring in that fresh talent that you want to hold on to for as long as possible, while more of us are working remotely? Because you could argue that in some ways that remoteness makes us more vulnerable to leave, to seek out fresh pastures.
Yeah, it's very interesting, right? And actually, you've heard a lot about this recently, whether it's Rishi Sunak talking about, you know, younger people early in their career missing out on office interactions. The Bank of England have been talking about this recently, especially around the impact not being in the office is having on the performance or the progression of female employees, right? So organisations have to take this very seriously. There's two components, right? One is we're not going back to life before the pandemic. So this idea of everyone going into the office, you know, being packed on a rush hour tube to get to the office by 8:30, not getting home again till probably 8 p.m. Thankfully, those days are over, and I think all of us would be glad to see the back of those days, right? Because we've all benefited, I think, from having an element of work-life balance in the last 18 months that, you know, we may not have had before. Yes, there have been downsides, clearly there have, but actually one of the upsides of the pandemic is it's really made us think again about how and where we work. So therefore, I think when it comes to organisations both recruiting and retaining talent, they need to be very mindful of the fact that nowadays, in a knowledge economy, workers are going to go where they can do their, you know, not just where they're going to get paid the most, but where they're going to fit in, where's the culture appropriate, where can they actually live to a lifestyle that supports their, you know, what they want to do. So I think companies that say you have to be in the office or here's your set working hours, I think they'll both lose talent and they'll fail to recruit in future. You know, I alluded to the fact recently that I've changed roles in the last few months. And for me, when I was looking at prospective employers, the lack of flexibility many were showing was a clear red flag to me that I don't want to go anywhere near them, right? And I think, you know, the organisations that are going to succeed here are the ones that have already come to terms with that reality. They're providing support to their existing employees, but they're also setting themselves up to make sure that they're bringing in the right talent in future. The other part of your question is still true, right? There is then a more pertinent point around how do you get these people working together. No one's got the answer to make that a perfect solution, but I think it starts with the mindset of the organisation.
But I like the vision which you set out for the future. It's almost like separating the wheat from the chaff about the companies which are going to do very, very well and the companies which will fall by the wayside. And Jamie, come into the conversation, because look, to make all of this work, to have this happy medium, happy customers, happy bosses, happy staff, technology is obviously quite important in that, but at the same time, it shouldn't be to the detriment of loyalty and trust. So I guess the responsibility on banks is to ensure that they're leading effectively and creating that cohesive, happy workforce with loyalty and trust whipped into the ingredients. How can they do that?
Yeah, 100%. So I endorse everything that Nick's just shared, and I guess to build on that, I think banks are at this point where there is a seismic shift in the way that organizations now need to be led. They were structured in such a way for command and control, where the bank could predict and plan for a certain future. That's all gone out the window, as was proven by the past 18 months. Now we need to structure in such a way that we're geared up as a high trust, high freedom environment, where it's not about we predict and plan, but we experiment and we adapt. It's not directive leadership, you must go and do this. It's supportive leadership. How do we create the environment for you to innovate and help solve for our future? And I think that's what our workforce have seen and experienced over the past 18 months. That is now the new deal that people want and expect from an employer. Those that respond to that and adapt and change their mode of leadership will thrive. Those that don't will see their talent walk out the door.
And Nick, I'd love to get your perspective on this, but coming at it from the view of a challenger bank.
Yeah, so it's interesting from that challenger perspective, because we'd obviously set up our customer-facing proposition as being digital first. So we were always starting from this idea of not having a legacy branch network and so on. But actually, we were still just as dependent as, in the same way other companies were, around the fact that we wanted our people to be together. So we also had to find a way to be able to work and collaborate effectively when we were all dispersed. We were able to do it slightly more, I would say slightly easier, in the sense that we'd already invested pre-pandemic in some of the tooling around omni-channel, around having integrated CRM, where some of the legacy institutions were perhaps playing catch-up. And that's not to denigrate them. A lot of banks, especially of bigger scale, have challenges that are more difficult to solve. So as a challenger, you can come in without that legacy and build for the future on day one. So we had that advantage, and going into the pandemic, that meant, like others have referred to in previous conversations, we were able to keep all of our contact channels up. Our customer satisfaction actually went up during the pandemic because we were able to answer the phones quicker, we were able to respond to the chats quicker. So there was definitely some benefit there. But we also suffered, and I say suffered because we also needed to bring our people together, and sometimes we weren't able to do that. And it's only now that organizations are trying to figure out how do they do it, whether it's big bang sessions where you have town halls, or whether it's workshops that you can then think about how do you get teams working collaboratively again.
And look, just to close this out, Vinita, we all found, because of the way that we had to work, that virtual was our new physical space, if you're happy to work in a tile. But what is it going to mean for the bank's actual physical spaces? Because they need to optimize the use of their localized physical spaces to benefit employees, I guess, to sort of wean us from one definition of physical to another.
I think it's a great point that you make, and I've been listening to these as well, to these arguments and the preferences, but I think either ways, whichever way we look at the physical space, the key thing that is changing now is that in the last 2 years, or during the pandemic, the first part was we didn't have a choice. That was a non-choice environment, and that's what we were to do. And the second thing, and I actually wrote an article about this right at the start, the second thing was everyone was working from home. So there was no missing out, because everyone's on the screen. And I think that dynamic, as organizations begin to now define, because now here's a choice. I want to be this sort of organization versus I want to be that sort of organization. Like supermarkets, one says I'm vegan, one says I'm not vegan, and everyone will find their identity and say, this is the sort of organization I want to be, and that's the sort of talent they will attract. So I don't think they're going to be winners or losers in that way. It's just going to be more, as I said, more variation, because now we can choose. And in terms of physical spaces, I'll be honest, I mean, I live 10 minutes from the office and I go to office every day. I love it. I mean, I just love it. I go to the gym in the morning, get my kids out, kick them out of the house and say, I'm out of the house, you know, I'm going to Pred, get my coffee, you know. Pred's doing a fantastic deal, by the way, right? So I get my coffee, I get into the office and I just feel good about it. And whoever's come has come, and some people would say, haven't seen you in a couple of years, you know, get a coffee, and you really talk to people, a heart-to-heart, genuine conversation. I mean, we haven't had that in years, right? So the point is, I think there's a space for those spaces too. And it's just about how we will use it. And I see in the office right now, the way it's working with us is we've got to book our desks. So from home, you can say, I'm going to be at that desk. And you can literally see who all are going to be sitting around you. So every day I choose a different place. I sit with a completely different set of people. And I think that's how those spaces will become. Even branches, I think, could become, you know, like when you don't want to go to, let's say, Canary Wharf and you want to work at your local branch. The branch could become an extension of like offices to say, this is my little local branch, and I'll just sit there and work from there instead.
I love your style, the way that you've actually sorted this out. Kids, the gym, the coffee, the physical workspace.
By the way, I wrote a book during the pandemic, so.
No, you know, it doesn't matter, it works, and that's the main thing, and it achieves some great results.
We're all finding our way right now, yeah.
We're getting there, but you've given us a model to work from, so this is good. You need to patent it, okay, just a piece of advice. But look, we've actually got this window when we can take questions from our audience. So panel, are you ready? Because I do have some questions here. We'll try to race our way through them. So again, the rule, any hesitation, okay, I choose. So please don't put me in that position. But what does a change positive culture look like? And how can you move your company culture in that direction? Who would like to take that one? You're grimacing, Jamie.
I guess that means I'll take it. Yeah,
I guess so.
I guess a change positive culture is a change-ready organization. So that's like, you know, we know that change is coming. We don't know what that change looks like. So how do we build the resilience within our staff so that they can pivot, to use that word that you've loved to use so much today? How can we experiment? How can we have a, you know, almost a failure positive culture? So like, it's okay to try something and fail rather than not try at all. And don't get me wrong, that's not about like betting the house. But that's about creating the safe spaces in your organization to try new things and to celebrate the learning that comes with that.
Would anyone else like to add to that before I rattle through the next question?
Ditto.
Oh yeah, he's spoken for all of you. Okay, that's fine. Let's move on to the next one. The really good one, in fact. Financial conduct regulators are now looking closer at banks adopting a hybrid work model. Do you think there is a higher risk of misconduct in a hybrid work from home world?
I can take that.
Yeah, go for it.
So I was heading conduct risk for Barclays prior to this role, but from whatever I know or I've done, I would say I don't think there's a high risk of misconduct, because essentially it's about doing the right thing, the training, the requirements, and nothing changes from the fundamentals, right? The key things that really would trigger someone would be maybe financial difficulty in their own scenarios, or just toxic culture, or, you know, bad behaviors, and, you know, when you're growing people for the wrong metrics. But none of that needs to change just because you're remote. You know, the company's values still can be really profound. So I personally don't think so.
I completely agree. I think there's this like outdated view that you could only be secure when your employees were in an office and you could physically monitor them. But actually, you know, many organizations probably found this, you end up having lower incidents of fraud or misconduct when the employees are working remotely. Clearly, organizations have to manage risk here, so you need to have effective tooling, monitoring. But I think actually the heart of this is culture. If people want to commit fraud or misconduct, they'll do it wherever they are. But if you have the right the right company culture, you will harness an environment where you find people that won't do that.
And frankly, to add to that, when we say fraud increased during the pandemic, it was external fraud, or
exactly.
You know, it's not internal fraud,
exactly.
Because otherwise internal fraud would have gone up, right?
We had too much time on our hands. Let's try and squeeze in one final question before I close out this session. To what extent does remote working allow us to have a truly diverse workforce, but limits us in terms of human interactions? If I could have a brief response from all of you, please.
So maybe I'll start on the diverse workforce. We can expand our talent pools. we're no longer limited to the physical location necessarily of where people are based. And I think that's a positive thing. I think we'll be able to see people get opportunities in roles that they may not have been able to do before because of where they were based. And I think, if that's one major positive of the pandemic, I think we should celebrate that.
Okay, fantastic. Jamie, would you like to add to that?
I agree with that entirely. So I think the move to kind of remote first working has been a real leveler of the playing field, because whereas before we maybe celebrated a in-office culture, presenteeism, and people were penalized because they had to go do the school run and everything else. Yeah. I think what we've seen, if anything, is a real opportunity now for the most diverse and inclusive workforce we've ever had.
And Vinita, very briefly, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think the part where you said we'll limit the face time, actually it increases the face time with different teams, because now your team is across the globe, but you're meeting with other teams. So I hang out with finance and technology all the time. So it's just, I think if we look at team in the broader dimension beyond our silos, it's a fantastic outcome.
Okay, look, thank you so much for that. Time, sadly, has gone against us, but you've been absolutely marvellous as a panel, some brilliant insights, which is why I think they deserve a round of applause.